The Sega Dreamcast is fondly remembered today for being the embodiment of Sega at the peak of its powers. The Dreamcast, like much of Sega's other hardware endeavors, was a console ahead of its time. Featuring powerful hardware, an upgradable internet modem, and a unique memory card, the Dreamcast was poised to be a force to be reckoned with, if not for Sega's financial woes. Despite that, the Dreamcast was packed with quality games, and at the end of the day, a console is only as good as its games. And in this series, I intend to explore some of those games. Now, this isn't meant to be an all-inclusive ranked list or anything, but rather a casual collection of games that define the Dreamcast, its mission, its legacy, and its personality. So sit back and enjoy as I explore a handful of games that defined the Sega Dreamcast. Soul Calibur was an oddity at the launch of the Dreamcast. It was a top-tier, weapons-based fighter from Namco, a company most closely associated with the PlayStation at the time. Adding to that little curiosity is the fact that Soul Calibur is, in fact, drastically better than the original arcade game. This simply wasn't a thing prior to Soul Calibur. In the 90s, arcade games represented the pinnacle of gaming visuals. Arcade cabinets typically sported complex and innovative hardware that home computers and consoles could never really match. That was part of the appeal of the arcade back then. You'd walk into these dimly lit arenas and witness the best graphics gaming could possibly offer. Then, on $99.99, Soul Calibur came home with a drastically improved look over its arcade counterpart. Adding to this is the fact that the original Soul Calibur was built on a sort of PlayStation-like arcade board. In the end, those of us who bought our Dreamcast at launch were treated to one of the finest fighters to date. Beyond the outstanding graphics, the gameplay was fine-tuned to perfection. It was easy enough for novice players to enjoy, while having a deeper level of complexity hidden within for the more experienced players. Beyond the typical arcade ladder and versus modes, the game also featured a unique mission mode, which essentially applied a loose story to the action along with match modifiers. These modifiers would do things like make the environment poisonous, shrink the play space, or block you from using certain moves. Sure, it's a bit gimmicky, but considering how little many arcade ports offered at the time, it was a welcome addition and can still be plenty of fun today. There sure are a lot of Crazy Taxi fans, and it's easy to see why. The game is yet another arcade port, this time from Sega itself, and tests players with picking up fares and delivering them to their destination as quickly as possible. As the name implies, the rules of the road don't really apply here. You'll plow through any and everything in your path in order to reach the destination as quickly as possible. Along the way, you'll encounter ramps that allow you to do sweet jumps, you'll drift around corners, tear up a few lawns and parking lots, and make tons of money doing it. Now, this is a ton of fun on its own, but there are a few smaller elements that make this even better. For example, your fares will not only reward you for being dangerous and risky, but they will comment on things. So if you take a hard crash, for example, you're going to hear about it. Likewise, if you do something awesome, they will throw praise your way, just to remind you that they're having a good time. I feel like I can't talk about the game without discussing its inclusion of brand names such as KFC, Fila, and Tower Records. This was so cool to see back in the day because video games were only just becoming legitimate, for lack of a better word. And at that time, we rarely, if ever, had real-life brands displayed within our games, so it was kind of cool and made the world feel a bit more realistic. The Dreamcast port also included a Crazy Box mode. This mode was essentially a stunt mode full of various challenges, and completing these challenges would, in a roundabout way, make you much better at the core game, as it would force you to learn the more advanced techniques within the game. Much like Soul Calibur's inclusion of a mission mode, Crazy Box does a lot to extend the life of the game here. And lastly, you can't talk about Crazy Taxi without discussing its soundtrack, which you definitely won't be hearing here. It's composed of tracks from The Offspring and Bad Religion, and is truly excellent stuff. While I'm not a fan of either band in general, their inclusion in Crazy Taxi brings an undeniable energy to the experience. Later releases of the game would have these tracks removed, unfortunately, but fan mods are available to bring them back if you're so inclined. If you haven't played Crazy Taxi, find a way to do so. It's well worth it. The fourth Resident Evil game is a true landmark within the franchise. It ditched the pre-rendered backgrounds of the first 3 games while maintaining the fixed camera angles, and the results are stunning. Many times they end up looking as good as their pre-rendered brethren. This is in part due to the new lighting model afforded by the Dreamcast hardware. For the first time, light sources could illuminate a room in a pretty believable fashion. In addition to this are things like rain and fog that give the new prison setting a very moody vibe. Character models are massively upgraded as well and can convey subtle facial expressions. This was crazy impressive for the time. Seeing the way Claire's eyes would widen when surprised, or the way Steve's eyes would wince in disbelief, it was truly amazing. Beyond that, the tank controls return, but are tightened up considerably, something that was a bit of a trend from one RE game to the next. The auto-aim is snappier too, with some weapons allowing you to target multiple enemies at once. The game was also rather beefy for the time. Where previous campaigns utilized a single 6 to 700 meg CD-ROM disc, Code Veronica used 2 1.2 GB GD-ROM discs. Oh, and no, Resident Evil 2 doesn't use 2 discs in the same way. Check my review for more on that. To this day, few games show off the potential of the Sega Dreamcast like Code Veronica. It's got ultra-realistic graphics, a sound presentation approaching that of RE2, and gameplay that was evolved over that of the first 3 games. Sure, if you're careless, the game can be pretty tough by the end of the first disc, but this is survival horror, and it's survival horror at its finest. Jet Grind Radio is essentially Sega the video game. It oozes everything that made Sega stand out from the competition. Innovation, style, a little jank, and a lot of attitude. In Jet Grind Radio, you play as a member of the GGs, a graffiti gang out to protect your turf. You skate around on inline skates, grinding on walls and rails, doing tricks, and yes, marking your territory with graffiti. Throughout the game, you'll encounter rival gangs trying to move in on your turf, and it's your job to reclaim it. Naturally, it's not quite that easy, thanks to a particularly overzealous cop who will stop at nothing to bring you down. And I'm not kidding here. This dude will send dogs after you, call in the SWAT team to take you down with tear gas, or even bring tanks and helicopters into the mix. This guy is straight up insane. The aforementioned graffiti is especially noteworthy because of the way it uses the Dreamcast analog stick to simulate spray can movements. It works like this. You approach a graffiti zone and hit the button to start. From there, you need to move the analog stick to match the movements on screen. It's a small and simple thing, but very cool and very Sega. The graphics and sound are the real star of the show here. Jet Grind Radio is the game to kick off the cel shading phase of the early 2000s. Wind Waker fans owe this one some gratitude. And it looks great here. With the thick black outlines, exaggerated character designs, and even more exaggerated animations, it comes together as something that only Sega could have produced. The scenes with DJ Professor K really say it all. The soundtrack can't be ignored either. While it does have some questionable additions in the Western release, this soundtrack is otherwise fantastic. Aside from the aforementioned additions, the soundtrack is largely Japanese and on the extreme side of that, but the energy it produces cannot be denied. While the game does suffer from some control issues and a nasty camera, you'd be hard-pressed to walk away without feeling like you just experienced pure Sega after playing this one. If one game comes to mind when thinking about the Dreamcast, it should be Jet Grind Radio. Sonic Adventure was long overdue by the time it released. Due to the failure to launch Sonic Extreme on the Saturn, Sega needed this game at the launch of the Dreamcast, and it mostly succeeded. It takes heavy cues from the likes of Mario 64, but let's be honest, it had to. Mario 64 set a standard for all 3D platformers that remains the standard to this day. so Sonic Adventure needed to measure up to that in a significant way. As you can see, Sonic Adventure has more in common with the modern Sonic games than those found on the Sega Genesis. There are no 2D segments here either. Instead, you spend most of the time running forward really fast while trying to avoid obstacles. Occasionally, you'll use Sonic's new lock-on move to bash objects and enemies, but that's really about it. One of the most noteworthy things about Sonic Adventure is the inclusion of what I'll call spectacle events. These are largely automated scenes that seamlessly take place between the player-controlled action. In addition to those events, you'll also find a surprisingly robust story between levels. Now, I'm not going to pretend that this is on the level of The Last of Us or anything, but there is more story here than other platformers really had at the time. Granted, it's delivered in a very Saturday morning cartoon sort of way, but still, it's welcome nonetheless. The graphics and sound, once again, stand out with this one. The graphics have this highly detailed look that sort of blends minor realism into its cartoony world, and I think it generally works. The sound too continues Sega's tradition of high energy tunes. Now, I personally don't think this holds up as well as the fans think it does, but even I can't deny the impact that it made on the legacy of the Dreamcast. It showed the world that Sega was back, and with Sonic in tow. The game looked great, sounded great, and played to the strengths of the Dreamcast in grand fashion. It would be hard to imagine a Dreamcast without Sonic Adventure. And there we have it, 5 games that define the Sega Dreamcast as a console. As I said earlier, this is not an exhaustive list by any means. There were so many great games on the Dreamcast that it's honestly hard to narrow it down to just a few, which is why I intend to make more videos like this one, detailing the games that define this forgotten console. I hope you enjoyed this trip down memory lane. Let me know what games you feel define the Dreamcast, and who knows, maybe your pick will find its way into Volume 2 of Defining Games for the Sega Dreamcast. Thanks for watching.